Hi everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to my channel. So today I just want to go over some of the notes and information that I've learned from the May 5th Red Dress Day, Missing and Murder Indigenous Women and Girls to Spirit and Gender Diverse People. There are lots of events that happen on May 5th here in Kamloops and other parts of Canada and the US and maybe even beyond that. But I have some notes from the event that I wanted to share. Not everything, but just some things that I've learned that I'm going to take away from this event and this movement and call to action. So, what I've learned, notes, a few pages. So, Red Dress Day is National Day of Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls to Spirit and Gender Diverse People to support family, and it's about having an impact. Red dress has a symbol of missing people that are taken from their families, and families continue to live with grief. There needs to be a call for action. Um, People would love to see their loved ones come home. It's not about money, it's about showing up. And Red Dress Day is not a celebration, it is to remember the victim. There needs to be reconciliation. It's a systemic problem, and we need more Indigenous voices in society. It's an emotional day because some of the people in the audience were family members that lost people, or that people were missing, or people were murdered. So it was a really emotional day. And there were some people there that family members have been missing for more than 10, maybe even 20 years. Um, it's about a day to remember the lives that were taken too soon. And looking at it through an educational perspective, as somebody who's doing a master's in education, there was a lot of talk about how we need more Indigenous voices in our school systems, in our curriculum. I know we do land acknowledgements, but it's a little bit more than just a land acknowledgement, about creating courses that include Indigenous voices and awareness to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two Spirit people. Um, yeah, just having those type of spaces in the school system where Indigenous people can thrive. I've taken a few Indigenous courses at TRU. I took Decolonizing Journalism, which was an Indigenous course looking at the media and how Indigenous people are presented. I've taken Indigenous children's literature, looking at Indigenous children's literature books and writing our own children's books, and how in children's book, especially for Indigenous children's books, there's a lot of culture in it. And I do a lot of book reviews on my channel. So I've taken that. And was there another? I think there was another Indigenous class that I took, and I always try to, any class that I take, try to add some Indigenous concepts in it. I'm learning the language, the Shukutmik language, and I'd love to learn more languages as well. So that's kind of that part of doing the work and that decolonizing piece, and that part in the school system, which is really good. What else? It's a day to take accountability for the things that have happened. Um, a lot of people have said how Indigenous women are viewed in society as not important or disposable, or just not really valued in society, unfortunately. And I feel like I could relate to that because I'm also a woman of color, that I also see a lot of women of color not being treated well as well. And maybe just women in general, not being really treated well. But when we have the intersectionality of gender and race, um, it's a different level. Like, there's some people who discussed how when Indigenous women go missing, it's not on the news. It's not. There's no Amber Alert, or there's no impact. There's no awareness of it. But maybe if somebody who's a white woman went missing, it gets more attention. And that could be for crimes as well. Like, let's say there was a black person who committed a crime. It just seems like the police are able to respond faster compared to maybe a white person that did a crime, or even the sentencing of a crime. There have been times where black people or people of color have done something, maybe like selling weed, like back in the days, and get like a long life sentence, while somebody might have done something really bad and get a shorter sentence. So just looking at that in itself, and some people get a slap on the wrist. So that came up. Um, and they also mentioned how these type of events, they plant the seed for awareness, and it hits home for a lot of Indigenous people. It's important to talk about these difficult things and have these difficult conversations so we can work through the trauma and shame and then try to move forward. There was talk about residential school survivors, and they don't take this lightly. Indigenous people are resilient, and that's why they are here standing today. It's important to protect Indigenous people. Indigenous people matter. And this crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls um, is not history. It's still happening now. I don't know the numbers of missing Indigenous women in 2026, but or girls in 2026, but it's continuing. Um, it's not from the past. It's right now. And missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people is not just an article. It it's happening, and it's in some communities this is like happening a lot. Like, this is like, oh, like this person went missing. Like, this is part of Indigenous people's experiences, unfortunately. So it's not just an article and you move on. This is real people, this is real life. And there's also talk about how Indigenous women are like becoming like the poster, like they're like the poster for missing women, and that's not a good image to be, represented as people who are missing or murdered. It'd be good if Indigenous women are represented in various fields and professions, and as artists and doctors and lawyers and teachers and elders, and in a good way. But to be represented as a missing and murdered person, um, that's problematic, because that's what people in society will tend to view you. Many as Indigenous people didn't get the chance that maybe me and you have right now. So for the Indigenous women and men and gender diverse people who are standing here today, and the young people as well who can make a lot of changes, it's really important for them, to do well, because some of them didn't get that chance. And sometimes you see in the Red Dress Day, people would have that red um, hand on their, like, painted a red hand on their face. I tried to do that, but it didn't really work on my dark skin. I guess I had to get real paint. I tried makeup, but it didn't show up on my skin. But that represents the silence of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit, gender diverse people's lives, the violence towards them, the racism towards them. And for Indigenous people, it's like they say that we're still here, we're still going, we're resilient. And some people believe that the color red, the spirits can see, and they could call the loved ones home. There was talk about the Highway of Tears. And the Highway of Tears is a 719-kilometer stretch of highway, 16 in British Columbia, Canada, between Prince George and Prince Rupert. It's named for the disproportionately high number of women and girls, mostly Indigenous, who have been murdered or gone missing there since 1969. And the name symbolizes the immense grief and tears of families losing loved ones along this isolated route. Yeah, I watched a YouTube clip, and there was an Indigenous woman. She was living in BC, and she talked about how when she drives on this highway, she makes sure she has gas filled up. She makes sure that her car is in good shape. She spends a lot of money on her car because, like, the thought of getting stuck on that highway, really freaks her out. And I think for anybody, it would freak them out. But I could see for Indigenous women how that would be so scary, and how you would really want to make sure your car is in tip top shape. But I think for some people, maybe don't even think like that, but that trauma is really scary. Um, yeah, we have to remember the victims, the injustices that Indigenous people are facing. No matter where you come from, um, there's a crisis here in Canada, and they talk about it takes 7 generations for healing. Yeah, 7 generations. So that's pretty long, and I think the healing starts now with this generation of young people. I've learned a lot from the Shukatmic people who are learning their languages, the young people, connecting with the land. And, that's that generation who are going to make a change or starting to make a change. What else do I have here? There's a lot of racism and gender based violence towards Indigenous women. It's important for Indigenous women to have support in our schools. The TRC is important. We got to take responsibility. There's a lot of challenges for the family and for the people. Yeah, Indigenous people have been through a lot, like residential school, the 60s scoop. There's a lot of disruption in their lives. Children removed from the home, poverty, intergenerational trauma. All these things could lead to MMIWG2S plus. Uh, it's important to ask for help, um, and support others. Um, there's a lot of shame involved. Yeah, we need to teach people about safety. Um, there's also some um, social determinants of health for Indigenous people, Indigenous child poverty. And I think for Indigenous, the social determinants of health, being connected to the land and language is really important. And doing ceremony and going to sweat lodges are really important for healing. And they talk about the red road and the black. I know the red road is kind of like when you're on the good road, you're on a good path. And like I got that that pink necklace from Indigenous women, and just gave it to me. And I think the black road is like you're still maybe not doing the best things, or you're still going through something, right? You're still figuring things out. But once you get on that red road, it's a little bit better. It's a little more clear. Mental health is also a big thing. Being in a system that doesn't represent you well, that doesn't seem to care about your needs, a system that has advantage for some people, not others. Um, affects Indigenous people, affects marginalized people, queer people, black people, people of color, women, disabled people. The list goes on and on. We need help. Indigenous people need help. So they talked about a lot asking for help. They asked like how many more names are going to be called. It's dehumanizing. They're talking about how some Indigenous women remains were found in a dump site, and it took a while until they were able to go and check these dump sites. Like, does that make any sense to anybody? Or how is it fair that a woman's body gets wrapped in a duvet cover in the Red River in Manitoba? Like that's not normal. That shouldn't be happening. We need to respect Indigenous women and girls, Two Spirit people, um, teach respect, walk each other home. When I get dropped off sometimes by Indigenous people, I notice that a lot of the times they will not leave until I'm inside my house or the door opens. And I think that could be a trauma response to make sure that, the people get home safe. And I'm also a woman, so maybe they want to make sure that I get home safe. Um, as an ally, we have a lot of work to do as well, to uplift and to spread the knowledge about Indigenous people. They're still fighting to this day. It's good to fight for freedom and not for fear. People wear red, for those who were lost. It means something. It means something when you wear red. Yeah, and in terms of the educational piece again, it's good to have good curriculum development that really incorporates Indigenous voices, and that's something for that solutions based approach that educators can do in our classrooms or just with people in the community to bring that awareness, doing things in a good way. Indigenous people have been here since time immemorial. Yeah, and some people want to see a TRU, a Faculty of Health Indigenous Forensic Health program, that could really emphasize Indigenous issues and awareness in the healthcare system, and to show that Indigenous lives do matter. And I think when it comes to healthcare system, like that could be a whole nother video. As a woman of color myself, I know that the healthcare system, when it comes to marginalized people, can be hard. I've read and heard and seen about sterilization for Indigenous women in Canada, who gets forced sterilization or coerced into sterilization after childbirth, which is so wrong. It's inhumane. The stigma towards Indigenous people in the healthcare system. So I think it would be really beneficial if there was a program or within the nursing, um, that they have some sort of course on that. Or even for educators, I think like every field should kind of have that, whether it's education, social work, nursing. These are fields that you're working with people from diverse backgrounds, and it would be really, important to be able to work with the demographics here in Canada, especially the original people of Canada. Um, when it comes to the school system, residential schools that their parents or grandparents, ancestors went through, it could be harder for an Indigenous person to feel comfortable, in a school system. So understanding that history as a future educator would be beneficial for you, so that you can have that trauma informed lens and the Indigenous approach when you are teaching students who are Indigenous or queer people in your classroom, or people with disabilities, or other people of color. Just having that little bit of knowledge would be really good to build that inclusive classroom. Is super important. And that's the type of educator I would like to be, because I want my students to feel safe. you know if there's a holiday coming up for them, they should be able to be excused from class to go celebrate that, because your culture is important. Land, culture, people, family, all that traditional stuff, is super important to one's health and well-being. And since that's been disrupted a lot for a lot of, let's say, immigrants, refugees, Indigenous people, that giving people that opportunity to connect with themselves is so important, so vital for their healing. And they'd probably do better in school, if they could connect with who they really are. Because it's not just about learning something like, oh, this equals this or this means this. There's also that student voice that is super important, um, because we're all unique. And when you find that your gifts, that what you're really good at, you can really thrive and succeed in any field, and you can let your light shine. And so, yeah, that's really important for us educators to understand that and the lives that we're impacting. So yeah, that's a little bit of my own personal report on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, to spirit people and Red Dress Day. I am starting a blog, so I might write a little blurb, maybe like couple of paragraphs about just a summary of what I've learned. Um, and yeah, and I'll definitely upload this video to my YouTube channel. I hope I can get it all in one video. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. And yeah, I hope you learned something as well. And there's more. Let me know. I would love to be an advocate for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two Spirit people, and gender diverse people. I would love to be an advocate for that. If there's any organizations out there in Canada that would like a volunteer, or any kind of opportunities to collaborate. I'm also an artist as well. I would love that, and I would love to have a little section on it in my thesis. I know my thesis is about intergenerational trauma for my community, and I'll look at a little bit of Indigenous population, especially the Shakotmak people, but there could be that part of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and like a little bit about domestic violence as well, because I think that ties in. It does. So yeah, if anyone wants to contact me, that'd be great. Or anybody that you think that could really help me on this journey, that would be wonderful. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.